JJ the CPA here. Hope you're doing well. This just in, hot off the press. Dear Western, my client purchased a $10 million building. I determined we need to hire an expert to conduct a cost segregation analysis, but the client refuses to pay for it. What do I do now? Well, this is definitely one of those that you have determined as that client's advisor what is required to ensure that you are completing a tax return that is as accurate as possible, following the rules and regulations, of course, set by the authorities, the IRS. So when you now put yourself in that position of being the advisor, and you are now providing advice, and your client has decided not to follow that advice, what I want you to consider is that your client has decided you are no longer their advisor. Now, why am I stating it in that manner? Because I want you to have some confidence that as an advisor, when you're providing advice and your client is not following it, well, then it's not your fault for you now to say, well, then maybe I need to withdraw. Now, I know some of you may say, well, that's ludicrous. Why would I withdraw? This is a client that I'm serving and taking care of. Aren't I just to be a guide for this client in preparing the tax return? Well, that would be the case if you're not signing the tax return. If you are not a tax preparer, maybe you would be able to justify being able to provide advice that your client doesn't follow and somehow consider yourself an ongoing advisor. But if you are a tax preparer, what we need to look at is Circular 230. And what we need to be mindful of here is that if you have determined that a third party expert needs to perform a service such as a cost segregation analysis, what you are then putting yourself in the right position of is ensuring that when that tax return is completed and you are signing it, that you believe it to be true, correct, accurate as best as possible. Now, you may say, well, if the client wants to forego the tax benefits that may be yielded from a cost segregation analysis, well, then that's their prerogative. And if they don't worry about how things are depreciated, then why should I worry about it? Well, the thing is that we have responsibilities as tax preparers to the IRS, separate and distinct from our responsibilities to our client. And so when we are a tax preparer, you don't get to pick and choose how you go about preparing the tax return to meet your obligations, the rules and the regulations set forth by the IRS. Now, of course, you can have a completely different opinion, and here's the good news: I'll never know. But what I want you to really keep in mind here is, if you're now signing off on that return and you know that whatever cost segregation analysis you now had to come up with, you have already determined, knowing your lack of experience, I'm one of them, that tax return is not going to be the most accurate. Now, you may also say, well, what's the big deal? They bought a $10 million building. We'll break it up into some assets. It's better than nothing. And it most likely could be more conservative than what a cost segregation analysis would determine. So what's the harm? And if you want to come to that conclusion, no problem. You're the one that will be signing it. You're the one that has to answer to the client as well as the IRS. And you may be in a wonderful position that works for you and works for your client. But what I'm wanting to do is give you confidence that if you believe an expert needs to be hired, then you should stick to that position, because one of the first things that my grandfather told me, who was a CPA, is that the first person that's going to turn on you when faced with an IRS audit is your client. Now, I don't mean that they're going to throw you under the bus, but kinda. And what I mean by that is that our clients are expecting us to be a tax expert. And if we now have prepared a tax return, they're going to expect, and probably rightfully so, that that return was done the best that it could be. That's why they've hired you. So now when the IRS comes to review, if they do, and there is adjustment, well, you have now put yourself in a position of being responsible. Maybe it is just related to the prepared penalties, but our clients can sue us for penalties and interest. So all I'm really getting at here is it is okay to tell the client, I'm not an expert in that area. If you decide that you want to become an expert in that area because of this, phenomenal. But when I'm talking with the client, what I tell them is, I am similar to a brain surgeon. And if you now needs heart surgery, even though I would assume you would have all the trust in the world in me as your brain surgeon, I would assume you would not want me to, and I would not allow myself to be your heart surgeon. So it's okay for you to tell a client in a specific area that this requires an expert, because I'll leave this to you in closing. A cost segregation analysis is a one-time event on a one-time purchase on one tax return. And I don't know about you, but I plan to work with my clients forevermore, the next 10, 20, 30 years. Your client will respect you. Your client will enjoy the benefits that you believe are going to be obtained from getting a cost segregation analysis done. And I believe that puts you in a better position, a stronger position to maintain that relationship beyond the 1 year. So if you have questions, send them to Dear Western at WesternCPE.com.